Right now, you are here, not inside an abstract idea, not inside a distant story, but within this familiar room where the light has softened, where the night is slowly passing beyond the window. Your breath is still happening whether you notice it or not. It needs no instruction, no destination. It simply moves in and moves out just as it has done for your entire life. Perhaps today your mind has had to carry too much. Thoughts that never quite closed. Questions that do not need answers yet. Inner voices that kept repeating themselves even after the world around you grew quiet. But this moment is different. This moment asks nothing of you. It does not require you to become anyone. It does not demand that you understand the world, nor that you understand yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul." Tonight, you do not need to search for peace in some distant place. It is not hidden in the universe's final answer. It is not found in understanding everything. It lives simply in allowing yourself to pause. Notice how this room is holding you. The space around you is not rushing. Time in this moment is not pressing forward. You do not need to carry numbers with you. You do not need to remember concepts. You do not need to prepare yourself to understand galaxies, black holes, or infinite distances. The universe will remain there, patient, vast, unhurried. And so will you. You are allowed to rest within this very small moment, just listening, just breathing, just existing without needing to prove anything. Tonight's journey does not begin by leaving where you are. It begins by realizing that you are already in the right place. From that very near moment, while you can still feel your own breath in the quiet room, you can begin to move a little farther, not with a great leap, but with steps that are very slow, very familiar. Human beings have never understood the universe in a single glance. We understand it by stacking familiar measures as if the mind needs stairways, each step just high enough to climb, but never so high that it becomes frightening. And the first step is always Earth, a small planet, small enough to imagine through maps, through the horizon line, through the feeling of standing beneath the sky and knowing that you are somewhere. Earth gives us a sense of scale, not an absolute scale, but one tied to the body, to footsteps, to the passing of a single day. Then we lift our gaze and meet the sun. A star large enough to make Earth feel fragile, yet close enough to be felt as a source of life. Its light is not threatening. It is warm. It is steady. It is familiar. Here your mind can still stand firmly, because the sun, though immense, still belongs to relationships humans understand. Light travels, light arrives. Day-night, growth, rest. From the sun, we widen into the solar system. Space begins to thin, distances grow longer. Yet there is still order. Planets move in their orbits. No chaos, no random collisions. At this level, humans feel a very particular kind of comfort. The universe operates according to rules. Albert Einstein once wrote, "The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible." Whether or not you understand physics, the simple feeling that nothing is arbitrary is already enough to soften the mind. The solar system offers a gentle lesson. You do not need to control everything for things to continue moving. And then from the solar system, we touch the Milky Way. Here, size begins to slip from our grasp. Numbers grow larger, time stretches longer, distance becomes abstract. Yet the Milky Way still holds something essential. It has a shape. It has a center. It has a rhythm of rotation. It is like a roof, vastly larger, but still a roof. Carl Jung once said, "Man cannot stand a meaningless life." And because of that, the human mind needs structures, shapes, familiar levels, Earth, the sun, the solar system, the Milky Way. Each name is an anchor, a way for consciousness not to slip into panic when facing immensity. You can notice this within your own inner life. When everything becomes too large, too many thoughts, too many questions, too many possible futures, the mind instinctively returns to familiar measures: a breath, a room, a day, a safe memory. We do not need the entire universe to feel meaning. We need only a portion, just enough to stand steadily. And so on tonight's journey, we do not rush beyond these measures. We remain here long enough for the body to understand everything is still within what can be held. Yet somewhere very softly, another feeling begins to appear, that these familiar measures may only be the beginning, that the maps humans draw to reassure themselves will one day no longer be enough. Not because they are wrong, but because the universe has no obligation to fit our intuition. And when that moment comes, when near and far begin to lose their old meanings, we will step into another chapter. But not yet. For now, you are still within familiar dimensions. You can still breathe evenly. You can still let your mind drift slowly. Allow these measures to gently carry you deeper into the night. There is no need to worry about where they end. The universe will not disappear if you fall asleep here. It is patient enough to wait for you. From those familiar measures from Earth, the sun, the solar system, the Milky Way, we have moved gradually farther away, yet still with the feeling that we are standing on a map. And then at a very quiet point, the map begins to change its substance. Not through new borders, but through a concept that sounds deceptively simple: the light year. A light year is not a distance, at least not in the way your body understands distance. It is the time light needs to travel. Here, space and time begin to slide into one another. A year is no longer just a calendar. A distance is no longer meters or kilometers. They become something difficult to grasp: how long ago you are seeing rather than how far away something is. Human perception was not born to live within this kind of measurement. We are used to right here and right now, to reaching out and touching. But when light becomes the ruler, touch no longer exists. A star 5 light years away is not merely distant, it exists in the past. What you see is not the star itself, but its memory. And if you move farther still very gently, another shift occurs. Near and far begin to lose their meaning, not because they are wrong, but because they were made for a much smaller world. At the human scale, far means tired feet, near means a few steps. At the scale of light, far is millions of years, and near is an illusion. Martin Heidegger once wrote in Being and Time, time is not a thing but a horizon. When light becomes the measure, time is no longer a flow inside you. It becomes the backdrop of all existence. You are not only in a place, you are in a very specific moment of the universe, and that if stared at too long can unsettle the mind. But tonight we do not stare. We pass by slowly enough to feel the change. You can recognize this in your own inner life. When you remember something that has passed, a person, a moment, an earlier version of yourself, it is not far in space yet. It is not near either. It exists in another kind of distance, the distance of time, and you cannot go there. You can only look. Light is the same. When we look deeper into the universe, we are not moving outward, we are moving backward. The farther we go, the older the world becomes. The wider we look, the thinner the present grows. At some point, the mind begins to loosen its grip on the need to locate itself. It no longer asks, "Where am I?" but begins to whisper, "When am I?" And then, very softly, another question appears. If near and far are no longer stable, where do our worries belong in this picture? The things that once felt urgent, the fears that once filled entire days, they exist on a very thin layer of time. They are real, but they do not need to dominate. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "Do not let the future trouble you. You will come to it if you have to with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." At the scale of light, future and past are no longer opposing sides. They are simply points along a very long continuum, and you in this moment are standing at a point calm enough that you do not need to move on. The strange thing is this: when intuition begins to fail, the mind is given a chance to rest, because it is no longer responsible for understanding. No map, no direction, no comparison, just breathing and letting concepts drift by like night clouds. We will go farther still. We will touch things so vast they no longer have familiar names. But right now, as near and far dissolve into one another, you may feel something very gentle. You are not lost, because there is nowhere you need to reach. Maps may dissolve, but presence does not. And in a space where light carries the memory of the universe, you are allowed to remain simply as a quiet point, very small and entirely enough. As the map begins to blur, as near and far no longer stand still within familiar definitions, we do not immediately step into something new. We pause. Not out of fear, but because the mind needs a quiet space before hearing a name it has never learned to call. In the universe, there are things that are well known, planets mentioned in textbooks, stars whose names sound familiar, galaxies whose images have become symbols. But there are other things as well, not loud, not repeated often, not appearing in stories meant for beginners. Not because they do not exist, but because their existence does not require human attention to be confirmed. Somewhere far beyond familiar measures, there exists a galaxy like that. You do not need to remember its name. You do not need to imagine its shape. It is enough to know this: there is a structure so vast that it is rarely told. As if the universe itself knows how to keep certain things unspoken. Not to hide them, but to spare an unprepared mind from being overwhelmed. In the inner life of a human being, the same pattern appears. Some thoughts return often. Some memories are called by name again and again. But there are deeper layers, things too vast, too old, too heavy, and consciousness learns to move around them. Carl Jung once wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Not everything needs to be brought into the light at once. Some things must be felt before they can be understood. That galaxy, we are not speaking yet of its size, not comparing it, not placing it beside anything familiar. We only know this. It does not often appear in common stories because those stories require things to fit. Humans like what can be told in a single breath, what can be summarized, maps that can be folded. But the universe was not built to match that habit. And perhaps what makes this galaxy special is not that it is large, but that it is indifferent to being known. It existed long before humans, and it will continue to exist long after all our questions fall silent. At that scale, a name is only a temporary label, a small marker the mind uses so it does not lose itself. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, "We are unknown to ourselves, we knowers. Some things remain unknown, not because they are foreign, but because they exceed the need to be known." And strangely, this unfamiliarity brings a very gentle feeling. Because when you are not required to understand, you are allowed simply to be with. You may notice this even now. When you hear of the existence of something so vast without needing to imagine it, your mind stops trying to grasp. It loosens. No image, no numbers, no comparison to anything you have known. Just a whisper in the night somewhere, there is something like this. And you do not need to do anything with that knowledge. It does not ask you to expand your awareness. It does not demand awe. It does not require you to feel small. It simply exists like a long, low note in the music of the universe. In later chapters, we will move closer. We will speak names more clearly. We will touch scale, history, and comparisons that fracture intuition. But not now. For now, let that seed of curiosity remain still. Not every door needs to be opened right away. Some doors only need to be known to exist for the mind to settle. You are not being left behind. You are not missing anything. You are moving at the right pace of a journey not designed for speed. And in this very small pause, when a name has not yet been fully spoken, when immensity has only brushed the edge of awareness, you may breathe a little more slowly. The universe is not in a hurry, and neither are you. We will meet that name again. But before it is spoken aloud, let the night hold you in the peace of what does not yet need to be known. That name at last is spoken. Not loudly, not with fanfare, only as a very gentle confirmation that this thing exists. I see 1101. You do not need to remember this name. It is not important in the way memory usually understands importance. What matters lies in the feeling that appears immediately after the name is spoken. A very strange feeling, not overwhelming, not frightening, but a gentle emptiness. Because from this moment on, the word large begins to lose its usefulness. We can place IC1101 beside the Milky Way, our familiar home in the universe. A vast structure slowly rotating, containing hundreds of billions of stars. Just thinking about the Milky Way alone is enough to make the mind pause for a moment. But when IC1101 appears, all comparisons grow tired. Not because they are wrong, but because they no longer carry meaning. As if you were trying to use a familiar ruler to measure a horizon with no edge. Here, imagination no longer helps. It was shaped to handle things that can be projected images, sizes, familiar relationships. But C1101 does not ask to be imagined. It was not built for that. It does not require you to see it in your mind. It only asks you to accept that there are things which exist beyond the capacity to visualize. And strangely, this brings relief. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." But here, this is not chaos giving birth to something new. It is the release of the need to control so the mind may rest. IC1101 does not need you to understand it. It was not created to become a story that fits human proportions. It is like a reality standing still for a very long time across a very wide expanse, indifferent to whether anyone is watching. And it is precisely this indifference that makes it peaceful. In your inner life, there are things like this as well. Thoughts too large to name, feelings too deep to analyze, questions that each time you touch them leave you tired, not from pain, but from not knowing where to begin. We often try to make everything smaller so it can be managed, divided, named, explained. But some things do not need to be made smaller. They only need to be set down. C1101 teaches a very quiet lesson when scale surpasses understanding. The healthy response is not to force more understanding, but to accept one's limits. And within that acceptance, there is no failure. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together." Acceptance is not surrender. It is an agreement with reality that not everything needs to be placed at the center of awareness. When you allow IC1101 to exist without occupying space in your mind, you are doing something very kind for yourself. You allow the mind not to carry a burden that is too heavy. In this chapter, the climax is not awe, but a very gentle withdrawal of the mind. No longer trying to compare, no longer trying to grasp, no longer trying to assign meaning. Only a quiet presence. The universe contains structures like this. And that does not make you smaller. It simply makes everyday anxieties lose their absolute weight. Things that once felt enormous in your personal life, a decision, a fear, a mistake, become more proportionate when placed beside silence lasting billions of years. Not to deny them, but to let them breathe. We will speak more about IC1101, about how it formed, about its long history, about what is quietly unfolding within it. But in this moment, it is enough to stay with the first feeling, the moment when large is no longer a useful concept. You do not need to go any farther tonight. You do not need to step deeper into numbers. You do not need to strain to understand. Just remain with this rare sensation that there are things in the universe which do not ask you to carry them. And when you set them down, the mind becomes lighter without losing depth. IC1101 remains there, vast, silent. And so do you here in a moment, calm enough that there is nothing more you need to imagine. IC1101 does not appear as a beginning. There is no moment of birth, no sudden flare to mark its arrival. If its process can be named at all, then accumulation is the closest word. Very slow, very long, and entirely without intention. Across billions of years, smaller galaxies that drifted through this region of space did not leave the way they arrived. They were held, not by hostility, but by gravity, an invitation matter cannot refuse. IC1101 does not hunt. It does not pursue. It simply remains. And in the universe, remaining long enough is already a form of power. Smaller galaxies are stretched, stripped apart, dissolved. There is no sound, no collision like those the human imagination tends to draw. Only orbits, slowing structures unraveling across millions of silent years. From the outside, this might be called devouring, but from within, it is merely an irreversible merging. IC1101 becomes a cosmic cemetery, not because it kills, but because it retains every trace. Stars that once belonged to other galaxies continue to burn, yet no longer carry memory of their original homes. Old orbits fade, former centers dissolve. What remains is a colossal structure woven from countless histories layered upon one another. The philosophy of this chapter lies here. The immense does not arise from pure creation, but from the accumulation of loss. In human life, the same is true. No one becomes their present self through a single radiant moment. We are accumulated from former versions that no longer exist, from choices that have closed, from relationships that no longer walk beside us. Each experience that departs leaves a very thin layer in memory, no longer sharp, but not erased. Sigmund Freud wrote in Civilization and Its Discontents, "The ego is not master in its own house. We do not fully control what has gathered within us. We simply continue living inside a structure quietly built by time." IC1101 carries no memory, but it carries consequence. A vast galaxy formed from innumerable galaxies that were once something separate. Here, death is not an ending, it is material. There is no regret, no recollection, only continuation without emotion. And this is precisely what makes IC1101 strangely still. A structure so large there is no room for small conflicts, no room for rapid change. It resembles an ancient forest where new trees rise upon the remains of trunks that decayed long ago. There is no clear boundary between what has passed and what exists. Everything layers itself into a state of near immobility. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote in On the Use and Abuse of History for Life, "That which does not kill me makes me stronger." But here, there is no self to become stronger. Only a structure growing heavier, more stable, slower. I-1101 does not move forward. It has no goal. It is simply the natural result of existing long enough in an environment where everything falls toward the center. In this chapter, awe does not come from size, but from accumulated time. Billions of years are not a number to imagine. They are a condition in which anything that happens quickly leaves no mark. Only what repeats long enough becomes foundation. This brings the mind a very strange feeling, a subdued comfort, that not every event is decisive, that not every pain is final. They are only very thin layers within a structure far longer than themselves. IC1101 does not remember the galaxies that vanished, yet it is made of them, and perhaps so are you. Not by holding on to everything, but by allowing time to quietly place each thing where it belongs. In the chapters ahead, we will look into the silence within that structure. Old stars, regions where nothing new is born. But for now, remain with this calm recognition. Not everything vast is born in light. Some things are formed in the long darkness of time, and that darkness is not frightening. It is simply silent. It is simply silent. After billions of years of accumulation, after countless histories have dissolved into one another, IC1101 enters a different state. There is no longer any clear motion, no more eruptions, no signs of beginnings. This galaxy carries an elliptical form, a shape with no preferred direction, no clearly active center, no arms extending outward to invite the new. Here light still exists, a great deal of light, but it is the light of old stars, stars that have nearly exhausted their fuel, stars that no longer give rise to new planets, stars that shine not to begin, but to continue something that started a very long time ago. The space within IC1101 is bright but no longer alive in the way humans usually attach meaning to life. There are no cold gas clouds collapsing, no stellar nurseries, no vivid blue explosions of cosmic youth, only the very slow expansion of silence. Silence is not the absence of sound. Silence is when there is nothing left that needs to be said. In the universe, life does not disappear with noise. It fades, so slowly that no one notices the moment of transition. IC1101 does not die. It ages, and that aging carries no sorrow, only a very deep sense of time. In human life, we often fear silence. We fear spaces without events. We fear days with nothing new. But the universe does not fear this. The universe understands that not every phase requires growth. Some phases only need to remain still. Martin Heidegger wrote in Being and Time, "The stillness of calm lets beings be." The old stars within IC1101 do not compete for light. They do not need to be more radiant. They simply continue to exist within a rhythm shaped long ago. The space between them is wider, colder, quieter. This is not a frightening decline. It is the natural completion of a cycle. In spiral galaxies like the Milky Way, everything is always in transition. Stars are born, stars die. Blue light and dark dust intertwine. But in a giant elliptical galaxy like IC1101, that cycle has nearly closed. Not because of failure, but because it has gone far enough. This brings a very gentle truth to the listener. Not every silence is a sign of loss. Sometimes it is a sign of completion. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished." IC1101 does not rush to create the new because it has nothing left to prove. It is already the sum of too many histories to still long for the future. And here within that ancient light, you may recognize something very familiar. There are phases in your own life that do not need addition, do not need repair, do not need reinvention. They only need permission for for silence to spread. Silence does not make you disappear. It simply allows unnecessary noise to withdraw. Like the old stars, you still shine, you just no longer need to be brilliant. The healing of this chapter does not lie in new hope, but in the permission to rest. A space that is bright but no longer alive is not a tragedy. It is a state the universe accepts after it has lived long enough. In the chapters ahead, we will move deeper into the center of that silence where regulating mechanisms quietly operate, where stillness is not accidental. But for now, let that ancient light touch your mind very gently, not urging, not pulling you anywhere, simply present as a reminder that you do not always need to live by the rhythm of birth and explosion. Sometimes to grow old in silence is also a form of completion. And within that completion, sleep arrives not as an escape, but as a very natural return. After the spreading silence of the old stars, we take one more very slow step, not outward to the edge, but inward toward the center. There is no new light, no clear shape, only a very deep darkness called by a name that often unsettles the human mind, the supermassive black hole. But if you are listening tonight, let us set aside the dramatic images for a moment. There is no monster, no gaping mouth, no pursuit. A black hole does not hunt, it maintains order. In a galaxy as immense as IC 1101, the black hole at the center is not a catastrophe, but a subtle regulatory mechanism. It does not need to move. It does not need to erupt. It only needs to be there with enough mass to slow everything around it. When matter drifts toward the center, it does not rush inward in chaos. It is stretched, heated, forced to surrender speed. And this slowing is how the universe avoids collapse. A black hole does not break order. It prevents order from breaking. By keeping energy from spilling outward too violently, by forcing what moves too fast to pause. Within IC 1101, the supermassive black hole has done something very important. It has prevented this galaxy from forming new stars. That may sound cruel, but in truth, it is stability. When energy is no longer fed into cycles of new birth, the colossal structure is no longer disturbed. It becomes calm, very calm. In human life, we often fear the dark regions within ourselves, places without explanation, silences that produce no action. But it is precisely these spaces that keep the mind from shattering. Carl Jung wrote in Psychology and Alchemy, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos, in all disorder, a secret order." A black hole is not a symbol of chaos, it is a symbol of boundary. It tells the universe not every motion needs to continue, not every energy needs to be expressed. If you look closely, you will find this deeply familiar. On days when your mind feels overcrowded, when too many thoughts press together, when too many emotions demand response, what you need is not more light. You need a center heavy enough to slow everything around it. A space where thoughts can fall without needing to return immediately. A black hole does this for a galaxy, and you can do this for yourself. Not by eliminating thoughts, but by refusing to feed them further. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Strength does not always reside in action. Sometimes it resides in non-reaction. In IC1101, the black hole does not broadcast signals. It does not need to prove its existence. Its mass alone is enough to shape everything nearby. At that scale, silence is not absence. It is the strongest form of presence. This chapter does not ask you to fear darkness. It asks you to see it differently. That some things are not bright, not because they are wrong, but because they keep light from becoming chaotic. When a black hole quiets the universe, it does not remove what is necessary. It only removes what has been moving too fast. And perhaps tonight you can do the same. You do not need to chase thoughts away. You do not need to force understanding. Simply allow a quiet center to appear within you. There, thoughts that arrive will slow. Strong emotions will soften. Not because you are weak, but because you are regulating yourself. In later chapters, we will see the consequences of this quieting decline, long stability, and a future with fewer disturbances. But for now, remain with this gentler image of the black hole. Not a deep mouth that devours, but a dark heart that keeps the entire structure from falling apart. And in that holding, there is a very soft invitation. You do not need to shine tonight. You only need to be at peace. After the center has grown quiet, after movements that were once too fast have been slowed, something else begins to appear, not loudly, not suddenly. It is decline. In human intuition, growth is always seen as a sign of life. More, faster, wider. We are accustomed to the story that says the bigger, the stronger, the more developed, the more successful. But IC1101 tells a different story. Here, the larger it becomes, the quieter it is. The more matter the galaxy accumulates, the stronger its gravity grows, the higher its internal temperature rises. And precisely because of this cold gas, the raw material of star formation no longer has the chance to gather. Not because the universe lacks energy, but because energy has become too stable. Stability at this scale does not create the new, it preserves. IC1101 no longer has bright blue regions of eruption, no collapsing gas clouds to form stars, no climax. The climax passed long ago. Now what remains is a rhythm that is very slow, very even, almost motionless. In human life, we often fear decline. We fear when emotions lose intensity, when motivation no longer surges, when we are no longer moving upward. But the universe has no concept of progress. It has only states. And a state can be complete without producing anything new. Baruch Spinoza wrote in Ethics, "Everything excellent is as difficult as it is rare. The quiet reached after growth is a rare condition, because it requires not only time, but the release of the impulse to keep expanding." IC1101 has not failed at forming stars. It simply does not need to form more. Its structure is heavy enough that small disturbances no longer make a difference. At this scale, things are no longer measured by events, but by the endurance of silence. And this, when seen clearly, holds a very deep beauty, a beauty that needs no new light, no new beginning, no promise of the future, only the long continuation of the present. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look. But sometimes that strength does not spring up, it settles. Not every source of strength needs to overflow. Some forms of strength exist best when they are not stirred. IC1101 reminds us that a climax is not an ideal endpoint. A climax is only a transition. After it comes not collapse, but extended stability. The same is true in your own life. There are phases when you no longer want to expand, no longer want to prove, no longer want to become something else. And society often calls this stagnation, but the universe calls it enough. When you no longer have to chase growth, the mind gains space to breathe. When you stop forcing yourself to produce the new, what already exists is allowed to remain longer. IC1101 is not in a hurry because it has nowhere it needs to go. And in that unhurriedness, everything becomes lighter. Decline here is not loss, but the withdrawal of chaos. Fast processes have completed their role. Large disturbances have left behind a stable structure. Now there remains only the prolonged presence of what has already been shaped. In this chapter, we learn a very rare lesson. Not all life needs to express itself through birth. Some forms of existence are defined by no longer changing. And tonight you may allow yourself to touch that feeling. No need to move forward. No need to be better. No need to create anything new. Just remain in a state that is complete enough to require nothing more. In the chapters ahead, we will look farther still toward the long future of quiet structures, toward isolation, toward fading light. But for now, let this strange sensation stay with you a little longer. That sometimes the highest point of a journey is not the final explosion, but the moment when everything is allowed to slow down forever. And in that slowing sleep arrives not as an ending, but as the most natural state of balance. After growth has settled, after powerful movements have completed their role, we step back once more. Not to move away from IC1101, but to see it within a wider picture. At the scale of a single galaxy, IC1101 may appear as an ending, a colossal structure that is complete, stable, quiet. But at the scale of the universe, it is only a sustained note. A note that is neither high nor low, neither abrupt nor dramatic. Just a very long bass tone within a symphony of space-time that is gradually slowing. That symphony is not played with sound, it is played with gravity, with motion, with expansion. And much of what shapes its rhythm cannot be seen. Dark matter does not emit light, it does not reflect, it tells no story of its own. Yet it holds galaxies together. It forms the skeleton of all structure. It is the underlying rhythm from which no melody can separate itself. IC1101 could not exist without dark matter. Not because it needs light, but because it needs silent support. In human life, we too often notice only what shines. Brilliant moments, visible achievements. But what keeps a life from collapsing is usually invisible small habits, enduring bonds, unnamed mental structures. At the cosmic scale, dark energy does something else. It does not hold things together. It pushes them apart, very slowly, very evenly, without emotion. It causes space to expand. It draws galaxies farther from one another over time. It makes future encounters less and less likely, not because the universe is cold, but because it follows its own rhythm. C1101. In this picture is not a center. It is simply a large concentration of matter drifting within the shared current of expansion. A note that does not conduct the symphony but sounds at its appointed time. This music has no climax in the way humans expect. No dramatic ending. No final explosion to close the piece. It only slows and continues to slow. Baruch Spinoza wrote in Ethics, "The more we understand individual things, the more we understand God. But perhaps here understanding is no longer the goal. Recognizing the rhythm is what matters." When IC1101 is placed within the flow of cosmic evolution, it ceases to be the largest galaxy. It becomes a state where growth is complete, where motion is regulated, where existence is no longer urgent. And this state is not special. It is what many structures in the universe will eventually reach if they exist long enough. This brings a very gentle feeling to the mind, that there is no ultimate destination, no final position to be achieved, only different passages within a long composition, some fast, some slow, some almost silent, and each one is valid. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "All is in change, and thou thyself art made of change." Yet that change is not always easy to perceive. Sometimes it is the prolonged resonance of a single note. IC1101 does not need to do anything more to contribute to the universe. Its existence is already part of the greater structure. And so are you. You do not need to create a dazzling moment to be meaningful. You do not need to accelerate to match some external tempo. You only need to be in your own rhythm within this vast symphony. In the chapters ahead, we will look toward a more distant future, when galaxies grow isolated, when light fades, when the music is reduced to very long tones. But for now, let IC1101 resonate as a slow, deep note in the background of your awareness. It asks for no attention. It demands no explanation. It simply is a gentle reminder that you do not need to hurry in a universe that is playing the music of gradual slowing. After the universe's symphony has slowed, after the low notes stretch into near stillness, we look farther still, not toward a place, but toward a moment very far in the future. There are no great events, no clear moment of ending, only the very slow continuation of a tendency that began long ago. Galaxies drift farther and farther apart, not because they choose to leave, but because the space between them continues to expand without pause. IC1101, once a colossal mass of matter, once the result of billions of years of accumulation, now becomes only an isolated island in an ever-widening ocean of space-time. Light from other galaxies will never reach it again. Not because light has grown weak, but because distance increases faster than light can travel. The universe does not close its doors. It opens too wide. And in that opening, each galaxy becomes a closed world. No messages, no exchange, no neighbors. Not loneliness in an emotional sense, but isolation as a structure. Light itself also changes with time. Old stars slowly go dark. New sources of energy no longer appear. The sky, if anyone were there to look up, would grow darker and darker. Not suddenly dark, but gradually, so gradually, that no one would notice the moment the last light fades. In that distant future, the universe becomes quiet, not because there is no motion, but because there is no one left to listen. no witnesses, no memory, no stories retold. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote in Being and Nothingness, "Every existing thing is born without reason, prolongs itself out of weakness, and dies by chance." But here there is no longer birth and death in the familiar sense. Only the prolongation of existence to the point where no one remains to name it. This may sound cold, but if you stay with the image long enough, another feeling begins to arise. Not fear, but release. When there is no witness, no one who must understand, no one who must remember, no one who must ask about meaning. The universe does not need to be witnessed in order to exist, and that is a very deep freedom. In human life, we often bind meaning to the gaze of others, to being seen, remembered, recognized. But the far future of the universe is different. It does not require an audience. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "All things are soon gone, those who witness them and those who are witnessed." Not as pessimism, but as a very calm truth. The final quiet of the universe is not the failure of life. It is the absolute balance between existence and meaning. When there is no light left for comparison, darkness is no longer frightening. When there is no sound to contrast, silence is no longer empty. It simply is. I see 1101 in that future is no longer the largest galaxy, no longer a record, no longer an object of reflection. It simply exists in a universe that does not need to be thought about. And this, when viewed philosophically, offers a very rare comfort. That meaning is not something the universe demands. Meaning is something humans create to live more gently in the present. When you hear of a future with no witnesses, you may feel lighter, because it means there is no pressure to leave a permanent trace, no obligation to be right, no requirement to be perfect. You only need to live in the moment in which you are present. In the chapters ahead, we will return not to deny that distant future, but to place the human being in its proper position. But right now, let that quiet vision enfold your mind, not as a sad ending, but as a very soft whisper. Everything will eventually settle, and when there is no one left to witness it, the universe will still be fine. You do not need to carry the burden of eternity in order to be allowed to rest. Tonight, it is enough to know this, even in a completely quiet universe. Your presence right now is already enough. After looking far into a future where the universe becomes so quiet that no one remains to witness it, a very soft question begins to arise, unhurried, ungentle. If everything will eventually settle, if light will one day fade, if in the end there is no one left to look, then where are human beings within this picture? That question does not need a grand answer. It only needs to be placed down gently. Measured by scale, human beings are very small. A creature standing on the surface of a small planet, orbiting an ordinary star within a galaxy, with no special position. The universe was not built to revolve around us. It does not need us in order to continue existing. And that is true. But that truth does not make humanity meaningless, because value does not come from occupying space, but from recognizing that space exists at all. Human beings are not large in size, but human beings have consciousness. Consciousness does not alter the orbits of galaxies. It does not slow the expansion of space. It does not prevent light from weakening over time. But consciousness does something else it notices. Carl Sagan once wrote in Cosmos, We are a way for the cosmos to know itself. This sentence is not self-glorification. It is a very precise description. The universe could exist for billions of years without ever knowing that it exists, until, in a very small corner, a form of matter begins to look upward and ask questions. Not questions meant to control, but questions meant to understand. Not to conquer, but to connect. Within the long evolutionary story of the universe, human beings may appear only for a very thin moment. But that moment carries a different quality, the capacity for reflection. The universe does not need witnesses in order to exist. But when there are witnesses, the universe becomes something that can be experienced. And that experience, however brief, is not meaningless. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "Everything is ephemeral fame, and the famous as well." But impermanence does not negate value. It simply places value in the present. Human beings do not need to exist forever for this moment to matter. They do not need to be remembered endlessly for this feeling to be real. Tonight, as you listen to stories of a vast universe, you do not become smaller. You simply become more accurately scaled to reality. And within that right proportion, a familiar burden falls away. You do not need to be special. You do not need to leave a monumental mark. You do not need to be worthy of the universe. You only need to be present. The capacity to be aware, to feel, to listen, to understand even a very small part is already rare. In a universe where most matter does not know it exists, consciousness is a fragile phenomenon but not a trivial one. Not because it is powerful, but because it is awake. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But sometimes the why is not a grand purpose. It is simply conscious presence within a moment that is quiet enough. This chapter does not try to place humanity at the center. It only places humanity where it belongs, not above the universe, not outside it, but within it, as a point of stillness that knows it is still. And that is enough. When you allow yourself to be small without being meaningless, you no longer need to resist immensity. You do not need to prove anything. You do not need to compare. You do not need to worry about a distant future where no one remains to witness. Because meaning is not born in the far future. It is born the moment you recognize this. In the chapters ahead, we will go deeper into the relationship between awareness and the universe, into how understanding is not meant to control, but to gently release. But right now, stay with this very gentle feeling. You do not need to be large to be meaningful. You only need to realize that you are here. And in that realization, the universe, no matter how vast, comes close enough for you to gently close your eyes. From that smallness that is not meaningless, another idea slowly begins to emerge, not loudly, not needing proof, that perhaps the universe does not merely exist, it also looks back at itself, not through eyes, not through language, but through consciousness. Consciousness is not something that stands outside the universe to observe it. It is woven from the very substance of the universe itself, from atoms born in the hearts of ancient stars, from structures that have passed through billions of years of transformation. When you think nothing outside the universe is taking place, it is the universe thinking about itself in a very fragile form. Carl Sagan once wrote in Cosmos, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." That sentence is not praise of humanity. It is a deeply humble observation. The universe does not need consciousness in order to exist. But when consciousness appears, something new happens experience. Not the experience of a separate individual, but the experience of reality itself reflecting back upon itself. Through questions. Questions do not always need answers. In philosophy, questions are often more important than answers. When you ask, "Where am I in all of this?" that is not disorientation. It is consciousness touching the boundary of itself. Martin Heidegger wrote, "In being and time, questioning is the piety of thought." A question is a form of respect. It allows things to exist without forcing them to become something else. When human beings ask questions about the universe does not reply with words. It answers with structured silence, with laws, with rhythms, with the simple act of continuing to exist whether or not anyone understands. And within that wordless dialogue, consciousness learns how to listen. The moment you are listening, not trying to understand, not trying to remember, not trying to turn this into knowledge, is a very rare moment. Because in that moment, consciousness does not step forward to control, it stays with. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." But here, consciousness does not need to stand firm like a cliff. It can be softer. It can be still water reflecting the night sky. When you listen, the universe does not need to perform. It simply is. And that presence does not require a witness in the usual sense. It only needs a point of awareness. In this moment, you are not standing before the universe. You are inside a very small movement of the universe recognizing itself. This does not make you grand. It places you correctly, not as controller, not as center, but as an intersection between matter and awareness. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster." But here there is no monster to fight, only the urge to understand too much. This chapter invites you to do the opposite, to understand less in order to feel more. The universe does not need to be explained in order to be lived with. And consciousness does not need to stretch itself tight to hold all meaning. It can rest. In a world where everything demands response, a moment of pure listening is a rare act. You do not need to agree with anything being said. You do not need to remember. You do not need to believe. Only to notice this right now, a very small part of the universe is recognizing itself through your gentle attention, and that however brief, however fragile, is not meaningless. In the chapters ahead, we will begin to return, not back to Earth, but back to a very small moment where all thought can be set down. But for now, stay a little longer with this very calm feeling that you do not need to go anywhere for the universe to be understood. The universe is already here. And in the moment you are listening, it is looking back at itself in a very gentle way through you. No effort required, no explanation needed. Only a presence sustained long enough for sleep to arrive as the next movement of that very stream of awareness. After touching the idea that the universe is looking back at itself, a very human, very gentle question slowly rises. How far do I have to go to understand all of this? The answer arrives slowly, not as an explanation, but as a letting go. You do not need to travel to IC 1101 to understand it. You do not need to cross millions of light years. You do not need to imagine numbers that strain the mind. You do not need to place yourself inside visions the body cannot follow. It is enough to know this, it exists, and so do you. These two existences do not contradict one another. They do not compete. Neither makes the other smaller. They are both true within the same reality. Human beings often feel tired not because the world is too large, but because we believe we must reach everything in order to feel complete. Tonight's philosophy invites you to do the opposite to stay. Stay with the breath that is slowing. Stay with the familiar room. Stay with the deeply human feeling of not needing to go anywhere else. Ludwig Wittgenstein once wrote in Philosophical Investigations, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." But here we are not expanding the world through language. We are expanding calm by accepting limits. AC1101 exists very far away. It does not know you. It does not need you. It does not wait to be understood. And precisely because of that, its existence becomes light. It places no burden of meaning on you. It demands no witness. It simply is. And so are you. You do not need to become greater to deserve existing in the same universe as colossal galaxies. You do not need to stretch your awareness to the point of exhaustion to feel that you belong. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together." Here, accept distance. The distance between you and I, C1101, is not separation. It is order. The universe was not built so that everything must touch. It was built so that everything has its place. IC1101 is there. You are here, and neither position is wrong. When comparison falls away, a very unusual peace appears. Not the peace of having understood everything, but the peace of no longer needing to understand everything. You do not need to know how vast IC1101 is to allow yourself to rest. You do not need to follow the entire history of the universe to let the mind grow quiet. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." But tonight you do not need to give birth to any star at all. You do not need to create. You do not need to overcome. You do not need to defeat chaos. You only need not to deny. Not to deny that the universe is vast, and not to deny that you are near to yourself, near to your breath, near to this slow-moving moment. These two truths do not exclude one another. IC1101 does not make you meaningless, and you do not need to carry the meaning of IC1101 in order to be allowed to exist. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote in Being and Nothingness, existence precedes essence. You exist before any definition is required, and IC1101 does as well. Perhaps the deepest healing of this chapter lies in allowing existence without justification. Not everything that exists must serve a purpose. Not all understanding needs to be pursued to the end. Some things only need to be known as existing and then left at rest. IC1101 is one of those things. You know it exists, and that is enough. You do not need to carry it in your mind. You do not need to place it on your shoulders. You do not need to turn it into a measure for your life. It is there. You are here. Between those 2 points is a wide silence, wide enough for you to rest. From here, we begin to enter the final chapter. Not by expanding further, but by returning. Returning to the present moment. Returning to a very simple sense of safety. Returning to a place where numbers can drift away without carrying worry. But before doing that, allow yourself to remain a little longer with this gentle thought that in a universe vast enough to hold IC1101, there is also enough room for you to be yourself without needing to become anything else. And as that thought settles, sleep may arrive as the natural continuation of that acceptance. No need to go anywhere. No need to carry anything more. Just stay. And then after having gone very far through colossal galaxies, through distances no longer measured by intuition, through ideas the mind could only touch lightly, we return. Not back to Earth, not back to history or the future, but back to this moment. Right now, your breath is slowing, no effort required, no adjustment needed. It is simply finding its way back to its natural rhythm, a rhythm that existed long before you ever knew any of the universe's numbers. Inhale and exhale. Perhaps you can still feel the after image of what has just been spoken. Very distant images, very large ideas, questions opened and gently left unanswered. But you do not need to carry them anymore. The numbers can drift away. Distances can soften and blur. Concepts that once tightened the mind can now dissolve quietly into the background of silence. The universe does not disappear when you stop thinking about it. It does not need your attention to continue existing. It does not ask you to understand, to remember, or to prove anything. The universe remains there, vast, quiet, and deeply patient. Martin Heidegger wrote in Being and Time, being is not something we can grasp like an object. It is something we find ourselves already in. You are inside this moment not as an observer, but as part of it. You are not outside time. You are not outside the universe. You are resting within it. There is a deep relief in realizing this. You do not need to do anything more. No need to chase meaning. No need to reach a final conclusion. No need to hold on to anything you have heard. Everything can pass like clouds drifting across the night sky without changing the sky itself. Lao Tzu once wrote in the Tao Te Ching, "Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished." The universe is not in a hurry, and you do not need to be either. Perhaps throughout your life you have grown used to the feeling that you must always move forward, always understand more, always become a more complete version of yourself. But in this moment, you are allowed to stop. Not because you have gone far enough, but because there is nowhere else you need to go. Inhale, exhale. Thoughts may arise. You do not need to push them away. You do not need to hold on to them. Just let them pass like meteors crossing a vast sky without leaving a trace. Marcus Aurelius reminded us in Meditations, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. The strength here is not control, it is release. Release the need to understand. Release the need to remember. Release even the need to stay awake. You do not need to carry IC1101 into sleep. It does not need guarding. It does not need further contemplation. It will remain there whether your eyes are open or closed. And because of that, you are allowed to rest. There is a gentle paradox in tonight's philosophy. Only when you stop trying to hold the universe do you begin to feel that you belong within it, not through knowledge, but through presence. Your breath slows just a little more. The body begins to feel heavy. The boundary between waking and sleeping softens. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote in The Gay Science, "We have art in order not to die of the truth." Perhaps sleep too is a form of art like that. Not an escape from truth, but permission for truth to rest through a night that needs no explanation. Tonight, you do not need to become someone who understands the universe. You only need to be someone who is breathing. You do not need to carry any questions. You do not need to carry any conclusions. If something still echoes, let it echo very softly. If something remains unfinished, let it remain at rest. The universe does not ask you to complete it in one night, and you do not need to complete yourself. Inhale, exhale. In this moment, there is no task, no expectation, nothing that needs to be proven. There is only simple existence, and that is enough. When sleep arrives, let it come like an old friend. No invitation needed, no holding on. The universe will still be there when you wake, as vast as before, as quiet as before. And for now, you are allowed to set down every number, every distance, every thought. Only the breath remains and the gentle dark. Stay here and rest.